Hello, everyone. Welcome to the series with the Reading League Montana, and we are discussing HB 352. And today we're going to be talking about assessment, considering what it takes to select the tool and what it takes to actually do the work and get it into classrooms. I am joined with some amazing colleagues, Ann Penn Cox over in Livingston and Megan Roth in Bozeman. They are in full swing of really just finishing the assessment protocol for HB 352. Woo woo, that's a big deal. And they are willing to share what they've learned. Everybody's had some bumps in the road. So I think it's really important to get honest with what this looks like in our schools. So this is a day about teaching you about assessment selection and moving towards that actual application. And then we're going to do real dialogue and talking with you. So I'll start out with some teaching, and you're welcome to turn your cameras off if you're on. And for those of you joining us later, there's definitely going to be discussion at the end. So hang on if you're listening to the recording. And welcome, Kim. And here we go. I'm going to pull up our PowerPoint slides. I have to get them into slide presentation. I think, what I want to really share about today is that, as this person that gets to work with a lot of amazing leaders across Montana, I am privileged and grateful that I get to see a lot of different things happening in schools, and what I really want to say to that is all of our schools serve different communities, and our communities deserve to have that focus on who they are and what they need. And so assessment selection and application isn't always easy. And I realized I pulled up a PowerPoint that I really wanted to share with you, but I didn't actually change the name to assessment selection and application. So please forgive me there. What this PowerPoint is about is really to hone us in on assessments, and really why we are doing HB 352 is for a very, very important reason. We want to make sure we stop the flood of students who have reading difficulties into high-risk zones in third grade. And to do that well, you have to stop the flow early. You want to provide protection early. And we do this because community prosperity is at stake. I always like to remind people that this little canary, we had canaries in coal mines for a reason. And reading and literacy and language skills are the canaries in the coal mines of our school systems. If our students aren't able to access reading and be literate young adults, this is a canary in the coal mine. And that is a very, very important reality for us to come to awareness about. Of what are our statistics? What have we done to make sure that if this canary is singing or if this canary is dead? Some of our schools, one time I was really assessing state data, and one of the states I was working in, 85% of the brown-skinned children could not read at basic skill levels. That's a massive problem, and our canary wasn't singing anymore. Our prosperity levels were not there. So we really had to rally the troops and figure out how to build a school system that built literate young beings. And that's what we're in the process of doing in Montana. I think this is a fantastic space to be in. So one of the things I'm going to talk about first is that when we build assessment protocols, we really want to consider that reading risk is a multifactorial model. There's no one single cause to reading difficulties. Okay, that is something that we as leaders and educators have to truly grasp. There's no one single cause to reading difficulties. Yet, the second most important things I'm going to say on this slide is up in the purple box, that the causes are no longer considered deterministic, but are conceived of as risk factors. So even if the students use screen have risk, even if they come from generational trauma, even if they come from a home with 18 foster children in it, even if they don't really show up all the time at school, that is no longer deterministic to their outcome. And we have to really, really get rid of our biases around what we think young children can and cannot do, because the research is clear that none of the associated deficits is sufficient or necessary to lead to word reading difficulties. All but 5% of children will learn to read. All but 5% will learn to read. And that's why we're doing this work. We want to find those risks early. We want to really hone in on what the risks are and what the protection is. So you can see in this model, the risk factors and the resilience factors. This is a model that's built out by Yakov Petcher, Hugh Katz, Linda Slomowitz, and some others. The work in this is saying, for us as leaders, you're selecting assessment tools. This whole introduction today is about, well, how do I select an assessment tool that I need for the students I serve? Well, really, we're looking at early literacy, right? But early literacy hinges upon very, very important things. And right here, one of the greatest risk factors in early literacy is language, okay? Look over on the protection factors. Oh, language is also a protection factor over here. The other thing, number 2 on risk factors, if you have a phonological working memory, or RAN, rapid automatic naming deficit, you have an extreme risk. You are going to see in our assessment tools these things being assessed, okay? Phonological skills, phonological working memory, and RAN deficits are being assessed. So really looking at those things is very, very important. Okay, so what we are going to consider is if we can screen those and if we can find the risk, can we protect them? That's the other part of HB 352. It's a targeted early intervention legislation. So that means we not only screen, we teach. Okay, and that provides the protection. So we have to find the risk and we have to find the protection, and there's no one single cause of that risk. So when we design an assessment protocol, we might want to look at many different areas of risk. That is where we start to discuss cut points. Well, which cut points should I look at? Which risk should I look at? Which one has more weight at what age? That's important, and that's why I started with this today. Now, when you're looking for a targeted early literacy intervention, one would think we'd want to know a lot about the reading brain. Stanislas Dehaene in 2010 reminded us that it was his firm conviction at that time that every teacher should have some notion of how reading operates in the child's brain. And that's why I start with this slide, because reading is built on old language networks. And this is a very profound aspect of reading. Reading is parasitic on language. Language comes first. So that's what this slide says. The brain areas involved, this is from my colleague Tim Odegaard and his team, where they compiled over 15,000 brain images. You can see that reading activates the brain in these areas that are considered kind of this purplish pink. Those are reading activated areas. Now, these are language activated areas. This is speech and hearing, and these are the meaningful parts of words, the semantics. And these are the parts of the brain of where they map. So you can see the reading brain is mapped onto the language brain in those two respects. And over here, we can see that attention and vision are also very important in reading. You know that if children cannot see the words or cannot attend to the words, we're not reading the words. So we always want to screen vision and hearing as well. So the HB 352 legislation doesn't say, remember, screen your hearing and vision, but that's actually federal law. So you have to do that too. That's part of the screening too. But what this is profoundly making me always aware of, and now for you, I'm hopefully elucidating this for you, that this reading brain in the middle, watch what happens when we overlay the language brain onto it and the attention and the vision brain. This is where it goes, and there it is. So you can see Stanislas' graphic image in the right-hand corner for you is overlaid into what is now fMRI study, functional magnetic resonance. And down here where the eye comes in, the vision part, we see the word, then it goes up to the yellow portion, we say the word, and then we come into the green part, which is we know what the word means. So it could be cup. Boom, you get a picture in your head and you are able to build that brain. Okay. All of a sudden I'm like, hopefully you can see the PowerPoint still out there. Can you see it? Ampen, I get feedback from you maybe? Yeah, cool. So this is why I'm teaching you this, because when you do early screening, you're actually assessing older parts of the brain, the language parts of the brain. You're assessing the meaning part, sound foundation of the brain, and you're assessing the sound foundation of the brain, which is phonological. So very clear, but don't ever forget to rule out hearing and vision. They also have to be screened. So now, longitudinal research has consistently said language predicts your ability to read words. Language predicts your language. So the better your language is, the more capable you are to reach reading comprehension in the reading process. In fact, so much so that the language prediction, I'm going to show you some prediction numbers, that vocabulary predicts word reading at 0.68 in first grade, okay? So word reading predicts reading comprehension at 0.81. That basically say that's 81% of the prediction of reading comprehension depends on your word reading. However, your word reading, it depends on your language skills. So I'm going to build that out a little bit more. I have a different model to show you. This is a model that comes from Maggie Snowling's work, The Language Foundations of Reading, where consistent prediction showed that language predicted letter sound, phonemic awareness, and rapid naming. And then it also predicted comprehension and reading later on. But language comes first, okay? Language comes first. And these models demonstrate for us that if you're choosing a selection process, if you're in a selection process to choose an assessment protocol, one would think I should think about oral language first, because language comes first. Language predicts everything else, because remember, the brain is built on a reading brain is built on a language brain. So I want to assess the language processes. So this is just another graphic of the simple view of reading. Now, this says word reading and language get us to reading comprehension. And what the research says is that oral language builds both of those things. All I'm doing is giving you several graphics to reiterate that language comes first. Language here, even in first grade, predicts. This is a model for 3.5-year-olds through adult. This is a model. The next one is a model of the simple view of reading, and this is just the conceptual model of how reading occurs. Theoretical, now it's proven in evidence, and that oral language underpins it. Now, this is the last thing I really want to talk about, is that when we consider if you have good language, poor language, good word reading, poor word reading, there are four subtypes of readers that we predict in these models. Now, simple view of reading, excuse me. This is, I'm not going to go deep here, but it's very, very important to understand this. You really are finding risk for a word reading difficulty or overall difficulty. But once you find that risk, within that risk, there are four types of readers that we can put into different interventions. And that's what's really important. All readers don't just get the same thing. All striving readers, there are different ways that their brain is working. And so we have to attend to language and word reading. But most of our readers struggle with both language and word reading. They struggle with both. And the second most are our dyslexics. They are our poor word recognition, but they have good language. Then we have our good word reading, but poor language. That's hyperlexic. Good, that's down here on the bottom, sorry. And then we have our general good readers. So this is what this looks like. And we even have a graphic and a scatter plot to show us that statistically in the research, this is where we find most of our kids in these three subdomains. And that's what you're finding risk for. You want to know that these students that could go on to third grade in risk categories, you want to know how to teach them. You want to know what to do. So you're screening. So how you choose a screening tool to screen out these things really matters. So oral language, from the foundation of learning to read, oral language really forms that foundation and builds on those skills for both reading and spelling. And this is just reiterating in the graphics. We call this a simple view of reading. We see it in decoding times comprehension. But according to the simple view, you need both components. And both of them are predicted by language. So that is really important. In the last decade or so, really, that's what I've shown you, is that the research indicates that language skills are the foundation of both decoding and later reading comprehension. And I'm absolutely in a different phase of my career where I used to do a lot with just looking at phonology and alphabet knowledge. And now I realize if I would have understood how to screen language earlier, I would have found children sooner and changed that risk trajectory sooner. This really matters for students who are coming from multilingual families, learning the English language, or who've just had environments that have not exposed them to that. So considering that reading is made up of decoding and language, what do we mostly screen? I use this graphic to consistently show that in a tool like Acadience, which many of you out there probably have, you might have AimsWeb, you might have FastBridge, you might have, let's see here, another one, EasyCBM. They all have curriculum-based measurement resources that allow you to measure within 1 minute the skill domain of the decoding process. Now, what they don't historically do is tap into the language comprehension system very much at all, actually, until 3rd grade. They start to look at the maze process, which gets brought in this slide. Now, this is really a conundrum because assessment tools historically haven't looked at language. So some of the tools on the Montana Advisory Methodology tool list have these areas of language that are being screened and assessed. And that is a fantastic new frontier. Not many of these tools out there have that, but Montana has a list with most of those tools on the list. And we should be grateful because that is putting us into a new space, especially to find risk in our young, the students who are just before 4 years of age in that that would be April, May, and June dates before the year starts in kindergarten, in early learning programs. So here's what Montana says. We have said, hey, in these age bands, look at these skills. And that's hopefully what these graphics have shown you, that these skills really matter. What I am here to say is that oral language matters over their lifetime, not just in 4 years in kindergarten. However, the screening tools tend to look at oral language earlier and not later. Some of our tools actually screen oral language until 12 years of age, some screen them till 9. So this chart isn't about that those things aren't important, it's about what those screener tools are typically screening. So phonemic awareness, for instance, it's mostly predictive starting at 5. Language is more predictive earlier. However, phonemic awareness is also really important in 2nd and 3rd grade, and its box isn't checked over here. So don't let this be like the chart that tells you the only things that are predicting. It's just that these are the things that most often are tested, let's not test, screened on our resources that we have in our list, okay? Does that make sense? Because you still want to know vocabulary of a 4-year-old. That's very meaningful to the overall language composite. You can't get a language composite without vocabulary, but that box isn't checked. So I just didn't want this chart to be misinterpreted. These things are just most likely screened at these ages. And these are the tools that we have on our list. We have a really robust list of valid and reliable tools. Some have been built for different purposes. You're going to hear from 2 amazing leaders in early learning who've tried 2 different protocols. They'll be able to talk about what they did for language and early phonological and early alphabetic knowledge. And we have our screeners for our students that are at the end of kindergarten into 1st, 2nd grade. Before they go into 3rd grade, we have all of these resources for methodology tools that have been approved on the OPI. It's on OPI's website, and these were done by the Early Literacy Advisory Panel. So I'm going to give you 2 quick examples. I just happen to have exposure with both Early Bird and Language Screen. I've been a researcher and I helped both of these companies out with validation studies and Americanizing this tool. This comes from the UK. 70% of UK schools, United Kingdom, use Language Screen. So it seemed really obvious that we should try to bring it to America. So I helped them out. So that full disclosure there. But this is the one that Livingston is using. So I wanted to show you that you can get a language screening These are all of the component areas, and the age band is 3.5 to 12 years of age right now for that full screening. And this is one for early bird. Actually helped norm this assessment in with over 100 and maybe 200 Montana students. Pretty cool. Also some students in Livingston and Hardin were in this study. They helped us understand the predictions of these tools. They have a comprehensive battery for 4 to 9 years of age. Also, you can see how oral language is at the foundation of this one. I don't have protocols from all the assessments. I just wanted to give you some examples for those early grounds, but foundations. But the piece that we really have to think of when selecting an assessment tool is really get clear with those early boundaries. How old are the students in April, May, and June? What are the cut points? What is the age band? This one is for 4. What if you get a 3-year, 5-month-old student, 3-year, 7-month-old student, or let's just say 3-year, 9-month, because you know they'll be 4 in the fall. You're screening them a little bit before 4, and the cut points then are not, they weren't criterioned or normed for that age of a student, so you really have to be thoughtful about these things. So the key takeaways I wanted you to take away today is that reading is an interaction of attention, language, and visual processing and knowledge, okay? It's not just, do they have this one skill and they go on to be a reader? But if they don't have that one skill, we are at risk because they have to integrate all of these skills to get to the Mount Everest process, which is reading comprehension. So the integration of the brain networks of language and vision allow the humans, us as humans, to read with language as a foundation. So if you don't have good language, you most likely won't have good reading. So we have, what we're doing is looking at the variations in the development of the networks. We're trying to see if there's a vision and hearing problem, if there's a little nuance in their language development, if there's a little nuance in their alphabet knowledge development, and then in their word reading development. So we're trying to see if there's nuances in their development that can tell us an insight about how that brain is pulling it all together, so we can help apply the instruction and we can normalize their literacy trajectories. Because understanding where they are really, really matters, so we can apply the right instruction. This is a profound statement, and it's so important to remember that we have to have hope for the future. And when we turn this over to Ann Penn and Megan Roth, they have a lot of hope, I think, like you do, that you're going to make a big difference in a lot of students' lives, because 92% of our students can have their trajectories normalized by the end of first grade if we really get this right early on. That means you should have less on special ed caseloads, less on referral lists, less children failing in 3rd grade. All of these things will be benefits to your system. So one last thing. I told Megan before I got on this call that this is the big one I get asked questions about. Now, I'm going to have Megan and Ann talk about this, about how they set some cut points and what they did when they started screening students. Because, well, what if we use a cut point of the resource we're using, but then we find that all the students meet the cut point and we don't have enough seats for them? What do we do then? And that's where I made a little chart. Remember, if language comes first, I might look at language first, and I might pool those kids into a group. Like, which kids don't have language skills? That's like a most important. Then I might go to letter sound and I put the ages for you. 4.5 to 5.5 is when letter sound knowledge becomes really important. Not at 3, not at 3.5, not at 4, not at 4.5, but at 4.5, that's when it starts to become important. So I start to look at when the research says they become increasingly important and when they actually predict later reading success. Then phonemic awareness. But then you kind of do what's called a gated assessment. First I look at this, then I look at this, and I put them with the track ribbon colors so you could see that we're talking first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth. Those are the orders I'm probably going to look at as they go up into the grade levels into 3rd grade. So that is the end of the talk to prep us for what Ann Penn and Megan Roth have done. They have selected, they have created protocols, and they have done the work. And I think that, you know, laying this foundation of like, it's really not a super easy process. You got to be really thoughtful about what you are doing. and what it means to screen and which students are the ones that really have the risks and where to apply your instructional resources, because you only have so many of them. So let's start with your stories, and Penn. Your story, and Penn, and then we'll move to Megan.
Yeah, absolutely. Did you now want to put up our assessment
I
pathway
will go
too?
grab that.
So like Nell referenced, we created here in Livingston a gated assessment pathway, really prioritizing language first. And with that, we are using Language Screen, which Nels talked a little bit about, to take a peek at students' oral language skills, specifically their expressive and receptive vocabulary skills, listening comprehension, and sentence repetition. And so that's kind of like our first line of defense, if you will. Um, and so, and we prioritize that for a couple of reasons. Absolutely, language is the foundation of reading. We know it's very important. If you look at the scoreboard, reading rope, it's woven right in there, and it's that piece that Nell keeps coming back to that is just pivotal for a child to have. So we knew it was important, but also language is so tied to social, emotional self-regulation skills for students. If you cannot follow one and two-step directions, if you lack the vocabulary skill to be able to unpack what someone's telling you or saying to you, you're going to have a tougher time. So we think it's really important to not only screen for that, but also intervene and provide like really solid tiered intervention and instruction for that. So we prioritize language, and you'll see that that's the first line of defense, if you will. If a child flags, and this year we're using cut point of 90 or below, on one of those sub skills in that assessment, there's automatic entry into the program. The way we came up with that number is we went back and looked at our data from last year with our students. So just, I say that just to really hone in on, consider your context, consider where you are, what your population of students is historically, and what will be the most impactful there. And then subsequently, yeah, like Noah circling right there, it's just really important to consider, your base population. Really, it has to be determined after that screening team has done all of the assessments. So that was our first line of defense. Again, if a child flags 90 or below on one of those skills, we discontinue our assessment protocol, and that child is granted it, entrance into the program. If they score above a 90 on all of those areas, including the composite, we then flow into digging a little bit deeper, right? Because we're trying to catch as many kids as we possibly can who demonstrate a need for targeted intervention. So we flow into our second part of our checklist here, which is administering the KTEA letter and word recognition subtest, and then the self, which is a phonological awareness test, but just the subtests specific to PA for developmentally appropriate students who are 3 and 4. So we administer both of those. We set our cut points again based on our base population there, standard score 90 or below on both of those. And or I believe 90 or below in the KTEA, it's a standard score assessment, scaled scores for the self, so it was 8 or below. And then if a child demonstrated a need in one of those areas, again, they were granted admittance into the program. We did end up building a fourth assessment into our protocol after some lengthy discussions with Nell and our literacy team here in Livingston. Specifically, we had a couple instances of kids whose birthdays were right on the cusp of our screening time. Again, you're screening in April, May, and June. And a child screened a day before their birthday may not flag on a certain assessment. If you waited a day, they wouldn't flag, which seemed really arbitrary to us and not equitable necessarily. So we thought we would use a CTOP, the comprehensive test of phonological processing, to dig a little bit more deeply within that phonological processing realm. So we also are administering the CTOP for students who are not flagging on that self, just to dig a little bit deeper with those phonological processing skills. And so again, our assessment system is, I will acknowledge, pretty intricate and definitely gated, like Nell said. Happy to share and support you if you're interested in exploring or creating an assessment protocol that is similar to this. But yeah, just acknowledging again, context is important. Your base population is really important to consider, and your kids who you're going to be serving. So yeah. Anything else there now?
I think it's important to add on to the idea of base population. Like you might be in a community where if you use language as your first screen, while ANPAN also noted that they used a cut point of 90 and below, which is low average language skills. But the base population, when I looked at the data, their average scores are 70s to low 90s. So it's not, but what if your base population scores are 60 to 70s? That's when we're talking your base population scores. You have to know who your community is, your scores. And while there is risk under 90, it also is telling you something very interesting. If most children are scoring at different points, like a whole standard deviation different. That's what those base scores are. That's why you would want to know that. And the link is in the chat. You can go directly to that article and read about it. It's very, it helps you understand that, yeah, cut points on the assessment tools are really important, but then also knowing who your community is and where it seems feasible for your cut points within your community. All right. So Megan, you want to tell us your story from selection to application and all the bumps in the road? You're on mute still, dear. There you go. Oh, nope.
I was looking at a bell curve to see where our percentile rank, what the standard score equivalent was. For us, we're screening like a fairly high volume of kids. So we've probably screened 250 to 275 students for camp, Jumpstart Summer Camp and classroom programs. So in our community, efficiency plays a role. And I'll get to what we've done and then kind of the things we've learned. Our K-5 reading program, data management and assessment system is Acadience. And so for us, using Peli was a little bit of a no-brainer because it feeds into the same database. So we selected Peli. Again, like I've learned some things about that assessment along the way. We had a really thoughtful conversation about what we wanted to set our cut point at. The cut point of the tool was in the 11th percentile, which is quite low. And so we used a cut point of the 18th percentile, which I don't know if anyone has a bell curve close by. I think it's like right at 80, maybe. So we could have tinkered with that a little bit. We were really wanting to ensure that we filled our program. And so we, for the kids going to Jumpstart Camp, we used the composite score because that was consistent with what we were using for kids going into first, second, and third. But for the little kids going into classroom programming for next year, we used all the subtest scores so they could flag on any subtest. We got way more interest than we were planning for. And so now we do have a wait list of kids to screen. So in hindsight and moving forward, I think what we'll do is not necessarily move into a full gated system with multiple assessments, because I don't know that that's feasible for us, but to apply weight from the subtests. It doesn't feel great to be admitting a kid into the program that just has a phonological, I mean, the cut point is like, they can only qualify on that test if they get none accurate. But again, like developmentally, that's not really a predictive value. And so I think in hindsight and moving forward, we're going to weight subtests differently and look at those pieces differently. There is an oral language, receptive and expressive oral language section of the Peli. There are 2 subtests there that go into that composite. That composite does not have super great statistics on its like predictive validity. And so, I mean, we might look into just moving to language screen and then moving into something else if that if a kid does not flag on that. But I feel like going from low average down in oral language is going to get us, you know, obviously the best predictor of later reading struggle. So it's been a learning curve. It's been a process. And again, like Anne said, I'm more than happy to help anyone try to sort out how to stand it up. If you're in a larger community, the logistics of scheduling screening appointments is intense. It's a lot. And so I didn't foresee that. And I think for us too, there's also a nuance of parent communication, of understanding just because your kid is showing this risk factor, it's not time to panic. This isn't an indication of a disability or later struggle. It's an indication that they would benefit from intensive language literacy instruction. So.
I love it, Megan. I think that between both you and NPEN and others in the state I've talked with, I think that we can get stuck in all this data, but the real nuance is like we really are doing this to provide excellent instruction for our youngest and our most vulnerable. And so I know NPEN and Hannah and I, the school psych, we all discussed like, how would I communicate this to a parent? So anyone out there listening, when you hear the word targeted early intervention makes it feel like something's wrong with my child. And I relanguaged that and I said, we are screening to find what we need to do better for all children to ensure that they have what they need to be ready to read in kindergarten. And when they're in kindergarten, their skills are integrated at a level where they can become proficient readers in first grade. And it tells us more about the instructional programming we need to do to meet your child's needs when they come to school. It's not saying your child's disabled or different. It's telling us how do we design excellent programs that help us make sure we close all gaps for all children. And it's not, you know, we also have to be very clear with our parents, like we're not just out there teaching phonemic awareness as a parent, you know, we're not just going to be teaching these interesting early literacy skills. We want to make sure parents are feeling confident in reading and loving our children and filling their lives full of rare vocabulary words and excellent sentence structure and rare, you know, children's text. So just being very proactive in how we communicate that message is but I do believe that that's a hurdle that is caught many off guard, that you have to, we should maybe have like a data bank of letters that everybody's written to parents. So everybody can benefit from each other. So if you out there and you're wondering, just write us. I'm sure we can help you out, but that's a big question. So I have a question because I'm getting emails about certain things and you've really kind of addressed this cut point issue. It's not just take the number from the screener and say that's just the way we're going to do it. It's about, let's consider how the reading process is developed. And to Megan's point, if we're going to say your cut point was phonology and y'all got zeros, was that really a good cut point, when actually maybe the language cut point was a better one? And if you're just looking at a composite, so really getting nitty gritty with how the reading brain develops and what that means across time for children will be valuable discussions for you. And of course, we can help you out with that too at the Reading League, willing to discuss those things because it is complex. But what I wanted to bring this back to is that it feels complicated that we might have different assessments from the students that are before 4, because if they're entering in at 4, but they're screened maybe at 3 years, 9 months, or 3 years, 10 months. And then there's a child in first grade who's 6, 7 years of age, and we're using Acadience. And over here, I'm using language screen. can you talk a little bit about the fact this assessment protocols you have within your districts? How many do you have?
You want to talk about that, Anne?
Yeah, so if I'm understanding the question correctly, just like how our assessment protocol for early literacy program flows into our K-1-2 assessment
Yep.
protocol. Yeah, and we are unique in the sense that we use Acadians K-2, or actually K-5. We did not adopt Pelly as our screener. And again, it comes back to context is important. We've done a lot of work and really focusing in on language and supporting that in our early childhood programs. And so a large reason that we chose language screen and didn't explore vetting that Peli process was that we already had access to that assessment, and we were already using it K-1-2 with students who were flagging and needing language intervention. Also that would have been, funding is everything, right? It would have been an extra cost for us to purchase Peli, whereas we already had access to language screen, and we had a leadership team who was ready to dig in and explore the self KTA and CTOP as potential things that we already had access to. However, that being said, we're being really, really purposeful with how we track that data within our MTSS systems and how we have an MTSS profile for each child. And there's beauty in all of the things, right? Now we have so much data about kids who we won't see for a couple months from now, which is really cool to start the school year, something that's really unique. So while language screen is the one assessment that's consistent pre-K through second, or excuse me, early literacy program through second, we will now have, that solid data moving forward. Does that answer the question now?
Yeah, I think what we're getting from the field is that people are going to have different protocols, yet they have to integrate them. So
Yes.
what I do for a 3.5 to 4 to 5-year-old might look a little different than what I'm going to be doing in a K. And sometimes our buildings are different. This is where the early learning happens, and this is where the kindergarten and first grade are, and sometimes the entire early learning the classroom setting is in a totally different building than those that are in the K2 or K5 buildings. And so that assessment protocol, it's okay if it's different assessments. What you're looking at is what you're screening and what's predicting the risk. And it can be easier if it's all in one platform, but I always tell people to be cautious of publishers or cautious of your bias to have everything in one platform. It doesn't make it the best assessment. It doesn't make the right assessment. It makes it an easy assessment. So just be clear that you want to find the tool that best serves who you are serving and your financial budget. Some of them are unbelievably predictive and supportive, and they're the cheaper option. And some are really expensive and may not be the best option. So you have to do your homework. Do you have anything to add to that, Megan?
No, I think that's accurate. I think, of course, like budget and accessibility, like is an initial like gateway decision maker. But the other thing is, yes, we entered them into the program through Peli, but they will all receive language screen when we that's not like the only assessment we're going to be using and the only data we're going to be tracking. But again, because we're purchasing language screen for our classroom kids next year, like we might very well decide to go with that in the spring for the littler kids. So I think you have to be willing to be nimble. Like this first year, we're all just trying to figure it out and just get something stood up so we can take advantage of the opportunity. And like you just have to be willing to do it imperfectly and continue to like learn and grow with it.
Yeah. Awesome. So I just noticed that most of our online folks had to hop off, and they wrote me in emails. But Jackie, you're on, I think. Do you have any questions you want to ask our two amazing leaders in this early space? Any questions of me?
I'm impressed. I feel like I've been trying to guide some schools into the same direction that Anne has Livingston. And I'm probably going to steal some of your words. I have sent a few your way.
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
it's
Happy
it's
to help.
been it's interesting to get to the root of, what are your reasons for needing this in your school? Because a lot of schools come to me with different questions and how do we do this and how do we do that? And they just want to qualify as many kids as they can, which is great intention. But they're in places where they're going to qualify more kids than they can serve, or just so many different things. So I would love it if you could email me your gradient
Yeah.
assessment plan. Yeah,
Did you get it? I dropped it in the chat box, Jackie.
I didn't grab it, but I can
Yeah,
from there.
you can grab
yes.
it. I think it's so important that you coming from your perspective, you're getting a lot of questions, Jackie, and I'm really grateful you're on this call because I do have obviously a passion point around language, but I don't, it's no longer just a passion point. It is such a reality that I think both Megan and Ann Penn, I just have full faith and trust that their programming is going to be on language, because
Right.
language is the predictor for reading comprehension for those third grade students that we want to not, it's not just about that though. It's their social emotional well-being. It's their ability to communicate with the world around them, express what they want and share what they need and share what they have joy over. And if children don't have language, they can't be part of a community, and we want them to be feeling loved and reciprocated in their communities, and that's where language comes in. So back to that very important part, I want to qualify as many as I possibly can. To that point, I think what we have to be really thoughtful about is that is absolutely true. We want to have as many kids in our classrooms, but be really thoughtful about how you're qualifying them and then what your programming is doing for them.
Right.
Because for a long time in Montana, we had to push kindergarten curricula down into our early learning environment. And our children were being pushed into levels of academics that was inappropriate or developmentally not sound.
Yeah.
And so now being really clear, well, now I have children who are qualifying for risk. What do children who have risk need? They need curriculum that's not just status quo 50th percentile, it's intentional, targeted, clear intervention resources for those children. And that's the next talk we have to do, is to address how do you choose resources that are really built for children who have risk. And that's not just your status quo general education preschool curriculum.
No.
So yeah,
it's not necessarily prevalent
no
in the standards. We've done some work and we say, we want you to be aligning your instruction to like the chapter 63. But as we know, there are a lot of people charged with intervening for these young kids who don't have the background knowledge.
That's right.
Exactly.
To give them that.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
And for us, like, I mean, this is off topic, but in terms of like looking at curricula, a lot of box packaged preschool curriculum is like so shallow in its depth. And so for us, like language has really played a part in designing our classroom environment, choosing our curriculum. Like, in order to have rich oral language exchange, they need to be having like rich, stimulating, provocative experiences and exploration in the classroom. Yeah, it's a.
Hey, I forgot to tell you guys, and I love all of you. Even if you're listening to this later, I'm so excited for all of you to hear this. Tiffany Hogan, dear friend and colleague, has now took out the Let's Know curriculum, which you all know from the Ohio State website. It is now in its second edition, and
cool.
we can get it in a pilot format to actually use, and it's built out for the whole year. And that's huge because now the books were no longer outdated. The actual scripts are all updated. It's a big deal. So that resource can be accessible for minimal cost. and it's not online for free now, but it is going to be available. It's been used in a school. Margaret Goldberg's school used it with in another important fact, Spanish speaking children. So two
Yay.
languages. So very important to note that we can have access to that. And so if you're listening to this later, just contact me, because it's meant to be in the hands of educators, and that's what we're working towards. And sometimes you just need a good language resource that if you had nothing, the one that's online, you can print that one out, and it's basically the cost to you is getting it into binders and finding the books that go along with it and prepping the content. And that has gone successfully in 2 schools I've implemented it in. So I know that works. But now it's getting its 2nd edition, getting a brush up, getting a clean up, getting all the language corrected, because when things are 10 years old, they need brush ups. So just so you know, that's another early learning resource that goes from 4 years of age through 3rd grade. That's a language curriculum, and better yet, they're building an intervention tool to go with it. So
Tell me again the name of that, please.
it's called Let's Know. And it's on the Ohio State's website. I'll write it into the LARRC, the Ohio State. Let's Know, and that's the free version. Let's Know curriculum. But the new iteration is something you have to write me for, because it's in research protocol right now, and but it's happening in 2 other sites next year that I work with. So I'm excited about that. So just so you know, everybody out there, that it's not easy picking a great curriculum when the HB 352 has asked us to actually teach the children who are most at risk. Curriculums weren't necessarily built for the most at risk children. They were built for the typical children. And then we do full inclusion model where children are all helping each other learn and grow together. And so now we have to be very thoughtful about who we're teaching and what curricular resources we're using to build that targeted intervention. So any closing thoughts, Anne and Megan?
I don't think so, but feel free to reach out if there's anything that I can help with. I know it's a big project, so happy to help.
Yeah, same here. Happy to help in any way. Thanks for hosting, Nell.
Yeah, thanks everyone. I know that you're listening to this later. We really appreciate it at the Reading League, and we know you've appreciated it. So thanks for all the emails, and a shout out to Ann Penn and Megan Roth. They have donated their time generously, and they are being incredibly helpful to leave a ripple effect for hundreds of children in Montana, not just their own local communities, but our state community. So I'm really grateful. Thank you, ladies. And thanks, Jackie, for hanging on to the end.
Yeah.
And we will see you next time. I think I'll post one on instructions soon. Okay, so we'll be on soon. Okay, bye-bye.